Hey, what is up, YouTube? It's your boy Tay Tizza, and I'm here finally giving you guys my review on Ghost of Tsushima. Now, if you don't know what Ghost of Tsushima is, it's pretty much an action adventure game with stealth-based elements fused into it, based around the feudal era timeline in Japan. Now you play the character Jin Sakai, who is pretty much on a revenge mission to take back the island of Tsushima for his uncle, Lord Shimura, from the Mongol Empire, who was led by their leader, Khotan Khan. Now, along this journey, you meet people like Yuna, Ryuzo, Taka, and the list goes on of devout followers who either you've encountered in the past, basically pre Ghost of Tsushima, and people who kind of just join the journey because they start to believe in who you are as, the savior of the island. Now, one of the big things about Ghost of Tsushima that I really like myself was the combat of the game. Pretty much you have four stances that you can utilize in combat, and each stance pretty much is representative to what type of enemy you're going against. So you have a stance to fight big brute characters, you have a stance to fight people who use swords, you have a stance to fight people who use spears, and finally a stance to fight people who use sword and shield. Now, each of these stances is unique in nature because, of course, utilizing these stances against their proper enemy gives you a bonus so that you may take them down much quicker than using any of the other stances. And I can say that once you pretty much get every stance, every fight kind of becomes a game of rock paper scissors in its own way, right? You know what type of enemy you're facing, but you have to be able to weave the fact that you have two brutes, a person with a sword and shield, a person with a sword, and then you got somebody from across the map shooting arrows at you. And you have to be able to maneuver between all three stances so that you can take all of the characters down in front of you effectively and still be able to attack the archer who's trying to kill you from far away. And I feel like that was how the combat and how all of that kind of played into each other really signified the the goodness of what this game is. That on top of the fact of how the story itself developed, there were definitely a good amount of plot twists and turns that happened throughout it in general that kind of leaves you questioning if what you're doing is the right thing or if how you're going about it is according to the way that Jin was actually raised. And that's kind of the whole precipice of Ghost of Tsushima is breaking the molds that you were taught as a child and kind of beaten into you and molded into you to believe a certain type of way about things and developing your own path. And I feel like that plays a huge part in the character development that happens with Jin overall throughout the entire game. It's moments where you kind of understand where he's coming from. There's moments where you would be like, this probably could have been handled a little differently. And then there's moments where you're just like, this perfectly makes sense on why he's going about it, in his own mind. So I feel like those are some of the biggest key points about the game itself is that, the combat's good, the story and character development are there, and everything else just kind of brings it together in terms of the fact that you have this very large map that, you can explore and get kind of an idea of what this island was like pre Ghost of Tsushima. So pre Mongol invasion, you see these beautiful beaches, you see these beautiful countrysides, and then you'll like go through a foresty area, and then you run into an area where the Mongols have completely raised an area, and now it's just burnt down, and there's houses torn, there's people who are now homeless and kind of you see dead bodies sometimes just randomly in the field, but it kind of makes sense to the aesthetic that's around it. because that character may have gotten robbed while they were traveling to move goods, or just even get to a whole nother village. So like the game itself really wraps itself up and gives you this idea that you're on an island that's currently being invaded, and it's your job to pretty much give people the hope they need to believe that tomorrow is going to be a better day than it is today. And I feel like Ghost of Tsushima really executes that well in terms of making a map as big as it is, and it makes sense as you traverse that map. Now with all of the good stuff, there's also some minor bad stuff too, right? Um, in Ghost of Tsushima, although this isn't a huge problem for me personally, I do feel like we kind of get used to a certain way of playing games in current times, and that there is no lock on in this game. So everything is kind of omnidirectional. So if you hold the stick to the left and you press square, your character is going to swing to the left. If you hold it to the right, vice versa. So how combat pretty much works is, if you were surrounded by a group of enemies, Jin will he will face that enemy, and he will kind of like give you a clear visual indicator that he's facing that current enemy. But at the same time, the camera kind of takes a more of a like a bird's eye view on the combat. So when you're swinging your sword or whatever, you kind of have to keep it trained on whoever you're actually trying to target. Otherwise, you will quickly miss that target, and then they get a free hit on you. Playing on much harder difficulties, that's a bigger consequence that you receive, because of course you're going to die much quicker. So I definitely ran into a lot of those situations, especially coming straight from playing Sekiro to this. It's a night and day in terms of how these games play. So, like, I took a lot of deaths that I didn't need to, purely because I was so used to the lock on aim and kind of being trained on that, and then coming to a game where that's no longer a thing. Now, it's not a big problem, but I feel like it's one of those things that definitely probably hurted the combat appeal for some people when playing the game. Of course, as you play the game more and more, you get used to it, so you kind of throw it out the window. But it's still one of those things I feel like can be brought up to say that this probably could have been done a little differently. Another thing that I did not like myself personally was the button orientation for how you use your bow and your ghost tools. I feel like they should have been able to be switched around to kind of fit, what your play style and how you may utilize your controller, so that it kind of fits to pretty much just how you want to play. I would have preferred it to be on like L1 rather than R1, because I would press L1 every time to try to switch my ninja tools, but then I'm switching, a whole nother set of tools. And it's like they have so many micro tools to use that you kind of get, in the mix of, you know, like in the moment, in the heat of combat, pretty much, you can get mixed up easily, is what I'm saying. And I feel like that was something that I feel like they could have added to kind of just give you that freedom to set the buttons up how you like. Um, and also, as you play through the game in itself, you start to notice that the variation in enemies is very lacking. Now, when it comes to a series that's kind of grounded in reality, you have it based around a Mongol empire. Is basically set in like 1274. You won't really have that much variation, but I feel like how they played could have been a lot differently. Hell, even when you're actually doing the samurai duels, you can kind of play them all the same way. Once you've done like the first two or three, you kind of get the flow and the repetition that the enemies take, and you can pretty much just use that to your advantage to overcome that situation. So I feel like that was something that they could have. just added a little more flair to, or kind of just gave the enemies just a little more something to make them significant to, who they are. Like even when it came down to fighting the leaders of the encampments, there wasn't nothing that really set them apart from the normal soldiers that they had, besides the fact that they took a lot more damage and they would actually parry and block a lot more of your moves. But again, once you got into the flow of the combat of the game, they quickly became quick work that it didn't even matter. So it was just like every fight with the enemy kind of became monotonous in its own way. Not that that's necessarily a bad thing. Again, it's just one of those things you kind of sit there and examine and be like, I feel like there could have been just a little more added to the variation and how the enemies are within this game. Um, and another thing that I kind of hated about the game is the knickknack hunting. Like, there's so many like little things that you kind of have to collect within the game to upgrade Jin. So you had the hot tubs, well, the saunas or whatever to increase your health. You had the shrines to get charms. Then you had the fox shrines to get the charms too. The charm unlock slots, and and then there was the poems that you would write to collect headbands, and it was just it's just so much knickknack hunting within this game that I feel like doesn't streamline what it meant for your character needing to progress in combat, right? Like you unlock the stances by killing the Mongol leaders or observing them and then killing them. But to get more health and stuff, besides you gaining more renown and legend through completed missions and stuff, the only other way that you would unlock more health would be to go to the saunas. The only way to unlock more resolve, which you use for some of your abilities, was doing the bamboo cuts. Like some of that stuff was just really out of the way. And honestly, if you just didn't take the time to go and explore every corner of the map, you would literally like pass over some of this stuff. And you could probably make it to the end of the game by collecting a very small amount of that stuff to actually help you upgrade gen. Like I said, unless you go out of your way to be like, oh, I only have 3 or 4 resolve right now. I should probably go and seek out these bamboo cuts to get more resolve. So I feel like that stuff could have definitely been done a little differently and made them more unique to their situations. Like I could understand the shrines where you get the little bonus charms and stuff like that. Those kind of being the knick-knacky thing, but to make your character's development be heavily on the knick-knack hunting, then that kind of took away from the progressiveness of you know, what it is to travel through a story I want to say a single player focused game like this, especially in an open world, right? You will get lost in it, and maybe that's why they kind of had it like that. They expected you to get lost in it, but everything is kind of one direction. I'm not saying that you just sitting here blowing through the game, but it's definitely kind of one of those things where you're going from point A to point B to point C, and sometimes you'll divert and go and get side mission 1, 2, and 3, and then you're back on the main mission, and then you go out to the side missions for a while, and then you back to the main mission. It's not like unless you're trophy hunting or something, you're not going out of your way to sit there and go to every single bamboo cut and every single Inari shrine. It's just like I said, it's just too much knickknack hunting on that. And besides those things, like one of the things that I didn't touch on earlier was like the skill system. Like I really liked how they had the skill tree system. It was very it was very short and sweet. It didn't need to be nothing super expansive. Like You got the second chance system from the skill system. You upgraded the bow to allow you to slow down time. You upgraded your kunai to throw more kunai or deal more damage. Smoke bombs would last longer. You would be able to execute more people from one assassination. So, like, the way that they did the skill system was very short, sweet, and it got to the point. They didn't fill it with pointless moves that you would never use, or things that you would never benefit from in some type of way. And it's crazy because there are some of the tools that you think that you would never use, and then you would go into a mission and that tool is super useful in terms of allowing you to progress to the next part. So like I definitely feel like the skill system is definitely one of those highlight points too that really sticks out for the game itself. Now, overall, man, if I was to give Ghost of Tsushima a grade, I would probably give it a solid 8 out of 10. Two of those points definitely are knocked off for um, the enemy variation and the knickknack hunting. That's literally like the only thing about it. Like I like the story, I like the combat, I liked everything about hunting for the special moves that you get from listening to the bard's tales that would happen. I collected all of those, and I just feel like the knickknack part of it though is really kind of what took away from it, and the variation of enemies, because once, like I said, once you get the stances and you kind of get the rhythm of the game, it really becomes the same thing in damn near every fight. Like it's literally the same thing in every fight. Now I know we can say that about a lot of games. Hell, I play shooters. Like that's literally all a shooter is the same thing over and over throughout the entire thing. But I feel like they add enough to keep you going. And that's not to say that Ghost of Tsushima didn't add enough to keep you going, because it definitely does. In the same time, you have to be able to call that out and be like, this still could be done a little better, right? You can praise something and still criticize it. It doesn't mean it has to be super perfect. It doesn't make this any less of somebody else's 10 out of 10. If they feel like Ghost of Tsushima was perfect from front to back, then I mean they can feel that way. But at the same time, you could say it's a 10 out of 10 and still be like, but I feel like this could be done a little better, right? Something can be perfect and it can still have just something very small about it that you want to tweak or change to either better suit your play style, or something that can just generally help anybody who comes on and plays the game in the first place. But yeah, man, overall, I would definitely give it an 8 out of 10. I really enjoyed it. I feel like if you have not played it, you should definitely go out and pick it up. It's definitely worth the money. And overall, it's probably on like sale now. I don't think it's on sale on the PlayStation Store, but I'm pretty sure you can pick it up for less than $60 now at GameStop or any of these other store places. But it's definitely worth the money. Um, but let me know what you guys think, man, down in the comments below. I appreciate y'all checking out my video and listening to my overall opinion on this game. I apologize for the delay. Things go on in life, but here we are, man. And I'm finally making this video and I'm giving it to you guys. So I appreciate y'all coming out, man. I'll check y'all next time. Peace.